Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest Mickie Mueller, and she's here today to share with us her new book, Llewellyn's Little Book of Halloween. Now, Mickie explores magic and spirituality through art and the written word. She includes magical herb washes in her art that correspond with the subject, making each piece enchanted. Since 2007, Mickie has been a regular article and illustrations contributor to Llewellyn's almanacs, date books, as well as many other books. She has been seen as set dressing for Sci-Fi's The Magicians and Bravo's Girlfriend's Guide to Divorce. So let's welcome to the show, Mickie Mueller.
Hi, Marianne. Thank you for having me.
Oh, what a joy it is to have you here, and what a great book. Oh, my goodness. You know, I just love it. I love how you just have this all together.
Oh, thank you so much. It was such a joy to write.
Well, it's got to be so exciting, especially since your book was a bestseller a month before it was released. I mean, how exciting is that, you know?
Oh, it just blows my mind. I really had no idea that was going to be a thing. So yeah, it was pretty remarkable. We sell them in our Etsy shop, and I couldn't keep them in stock.
I can see why. Well, so I have to ask, I mean, this is just, from beginning to end, this is just the coolest little book about Halloween. You know, what inspired you to write this?
Well, I've always loved Halloween. It's always been my favorite holiday. And what actually happened was I was finishing up the artwork for another project that I have out, Magical Dogs Tarot. And I was literally kind of skidding in on the finish line on that one. And I actually was contacted by Llewellyn, and they have this fantastic series of books that they call the Little Book Series. And they wanted someone to write Llewellyn's Little Book of Halloween. And I was just like, oh, my gosh, I'm so inundated with work right now. But there's no way I'm going to say no to this, because it's my favorite thing in the world is Halloween. So I was like, well, of course I have to say yes, you know. That was pretty easy. And I think that Bill, when he sent me the email, he knew as well that there's no way I was going to say no to that.
Yeah. Well, and I have to say, I love Magical Dogs Tarot. I think that is
Thank you.
Deck. And I love the artwork that you did on that. I mean, you did such a beautiful job.
Thank you so much. That was another one that was a joy to work on, because my husband wrote the lion's share of the book for that. And, you know, working with him on the project was a lot of fun, because we have kind of a shorthand, you know, that he understands me and I understand him, and we're able to kind of make it all work. So yeah, that was a fantastic project to work on. But I gotta say, going from that to right into the Halloween book was tremendous. And the neat thing was that they had contacted me right around the time that all the Halloween stuff starts to hit the shelves last year. And so during the time that I was pulling this whole book together, the concepts and everything, I was surrounded by Halloween. You know, sometimes when you're writing a seasonal book, you don't get to be immersed in the season, because you write it according to the deadline that you're given, and not necessarily when you're inspired. But the Halloween book just worked out, because it was literally happening while I was writing this book. So it was fantastic to have it in the moment and happening on the pages.
Well, in the Halloween book, you talk about how the veil is really thin between the worlds right now. And I'd love for you to share a little bit more about that.
Well, there are two times of the year that we think about when everything shifts. And one of them is the Celtic season celebration that we call Samhain, which is what Halloween was originally. And the other one is Beltane, which is May 1st or May Day. And those are the two hinges of the year when the times shift. And according to what the Celts believed, and we see it it's interesting because we see it in other societies as well, that these are the times of the year when the realm of the spirit world kind of leaks through a little bit into the material world that we live in. And so our senses become heightened. We notice things more that we might not have before. Some people that do, paranormal investigations will even say, Halloween is the time of the year when you really want to be, doing those kinds of things because you're going to get more spirit activity. So it's something that's been noticed across cultures. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's also because it's the time of the year when in the Celtic society they were basically pretty much done with the harvest. They were getting ready to batten down the hatches for a long, hard winter, and so it's also the time of the year that everybody thinks of mortality and these kind of things, which made them think about things like the fairies, messing with you, or the spirits of your ancestors that you wanted to venerate and feeling like they were there with you. And it's something that I did a little bit of research and talked to some of my witches, and I know I noticed it even when I was a kid. I noticed there was something more to Halloween than just the costumes and the candy. There was something more there, and I felt it and I sensed it. And when I checked with some of my witches, they agreed with me, and a lot of them said, "Oh yeah, I always noticed a change, a shift, that something weird was going on, kind of in the background of the real world." And so it's kind of neat how people have experienced that.
Yeah, and what it looks like. Well, and I'm so glad that you shared that with us, because I didn't know that, May 1st was also like this time of year that, we, have that realm a little bit more open to us, because there is something with that. I mean, it's been something that's known throughout, like thousands of years. People are honoring these different times and for a specific reason.
Definitely. And, it's kind of cool, really, because it works well with the northern and the southern hemisphere, because of course they celebrate the pagan holidays opposite that we do in the northern hemisphere, the southern hemisphere people. So when we're celebrating Beltane, they're celebrating Samhain, and vice versa.
And all that. Well, and so that's some of the history of Halloween. Is there anything else that you would like to add to that?
Oh gosh, the history of Halloween is so fascinating, and it's sort of convoluted because of the way that it moved from being basically a pagan celebration that we only know about, from things like the Irish Book of Invasions, where they talk about the holiday, and it's just shifted and changed so much through the years. The pagans, the Roman pagans were celebrating Lemuria, and that was in the beginning of May, interestingly enough. Now, it wasn't May 1st, it was the 9th, 11th, and 13th. That was also a festival of the dead that the Romans celebrated. They had ghosts and dark spirits that they believed they needed to, be concerned about because they hadn't been properly buried. Or for whatever reason, they were hanging out in our realm. And the head of the household would bang pots and offer black beans for them to just, hit the road, move on, kind of exercising their space. What happened was the church had decided that we need to stop these pagan practices. And they kind of adopted if you can't beat them, join them theory. Because so many people would not let some of these practices go, especially the ones that were related to the spirits of the dead. The pagan people did not want to let those things go. So what they did was they co-opted those holidays and sanctified them. And that particular holiday of Lemuria, that's hard for me to say, was actually turned into All Saints' Day, which was a time to honor all the saints. And so in this way, they were able to say, you could kind of still do your practice, we're just going to shift it a little bit, and we're going to do it this way instead. And then later on, of course, they realized that the pagans in the British Isles were not letting go of Samhain because that was a really old festival, and people weren't willing to let that go. So they used the same technique. What they ended up doing was moving All Saints' Day from May to November 1st, the day after they normally would celebrate Samhain in the rural areas in the British Isles. So it was an easy way for them to, again, co-opt that. Then they added All Souls' Day because, of course, the people in the British Isles also they weren't going to give up the idea of honoring their own ancestors, their own beloved dead who had passed. They wanted to hang on to that. So they were, okay, we'll give you All Souls' Day. And you know what you can do is you can pray a whole lot for the people that, for whatever reason can't move on. And on All Souls' Day, that will help them to move on from purgatory and go to heaven. So that's where we get the whole idea of trick or treat kind of comes from there. What had happened was people began doing a practice called souling. They would go from door to door offering up prayers for the dead of that household in exchange for treats that they called soul cakes. And that was kind of where that tradition came from. It's just changed so much through the years, on and on. It evolved into a way to basically bribe children to keep them from pulling pranks on Halloween night.
Yeah, instead of doing something else because,
exactly.
There was a lot of belief that, hey, if you did honor it, then, you'd have other things happening.
Yes.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I'm glad that you talked about soul cakes because that was one of the questions I had for you. And the other one is, you in your book, you also talk about doorway guarding wreaths. What is that?
Oh, it's a wonderful practice. I think that I feel like the energies that, we try to keep our home as a sacred space. When we go out into the world, and you never know what you're going to encounter out there. Some cranky person at the grocery store or, drama at work or whatever. So when we come home, we want to walk into our home and have it be a sacred space. Well, the other thing that I've noticed is, because I do house clearings occasionally for people, is that sometimes things can ramp up during Halloween, during that season, when the veil is thin, because in addition to, your cranky neighbors always looking at your house and going, I don't like the way that guy looks. Or, you also have then the other issue of their spirits, who are becoming more palpable in our world. So one of the neat things that you can do to keep your space protected and safe is to do any kind of doorway magic. I love the idea of a wreath because it hangs on your door. It looks just like a pretty wreath, but you can enchant it and fill it full of magic for the doorway to basically protect it from negative energy that might come in through your door. When we do a house cleansing, a lot of times, one of the methods is to sweep all the negativity out of the door. So, and even in feng shui, we talk about things like doors and windows as being, gateways into your space. So the idea of putting magical items, hiding them hither and thither on a pretty wreath that hangs on your door is just a really great way to keep your space sacred and happy and elevated.
Yeah, so it's interesting how you can do all these fun and interesting things. And I'd love for you to kind of, explain, what are some of the other ways that we can, create a haunting atmosphere?
Oh, well, yeah, there's a lot of wonderful ways to do that. One of my favorites, of course, is the jack-o'-lantern, which we all love. It's, of course, very iconic, and it goes back to the old practices in the Celtic areas in Ireland, So that's a wonderful way to bring kind of a haunting atmosphere. There's so many methods, so many different ways. I've heard people, say, when they go to the Halloween store or something, everything there's so gruesome and grim and, scary and bloody. And it's like, if that's your thing, then go with it. but it's not for everybody. So some people like a more spiritual approach. So, one of the things that you can do is, frame old-timey pictures to bring kind of that spiritual haunting atmosphere in. I love the images of the old trick-or-treat costumes that people used to. The homemade ones are so creepy looking, and they're all very well in public domain. So you can find those and print them out and put them on candles. Just use a glue stick and pop them onto a pretty jar candle, and then you have an instant kind of creepy decoration for Halloween. There's the old standards of, there's so many things that you can get, that you can purchase nowadays, that you can, string up fake spider webs and things like that. Back in the day, though, back in, like the 80s, the 70s, and the early 80s, we didn't have all the aisles of Halloween stuff that we have now, so we had to do a lot of DIY, You see a lot of people putting, cemeteries in their front yard. And I feel like that's kind of a neat thing to do, because it does tie in with the whole idea of the Festival of the Dead and remembering the ancestors. We do it in a tongue-in-cheek way, in a fun way, that kind of laughs a little bit at death, which is good, because the Celts didn't really, have the ideas about death that we always have, that it's a terrifying, scary thing. It's a part of life. So the idea of putting a cemetery in your front yard with funny names on it, or, maybe even literary figures that you admire, is kind of a cool way to bring a spooky atmosphere while keeping it witchy and remembering, that there's a reason for all of these things.
Yeah,
so, there's a lot of really neat things that you can do to bring that atmosphere to life.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the Celts aren't afraid of too much anyway.
No. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and so when we talk, it's interesting how we look at when one society or religion or what have you works to incorporate another into their society, how they do take over those holidays and will make them kind of their holiday,
Definitely.
So, and that's something that seems to have happened over and over and over again throughout the course of Halloween. So when we look at some of the folklore and the traditions, maybe some of the customs with this, what can we look for in that?
Well, there's a lot of things, like I talked about before, of course, with the trick or treat comes back from the soul cakes, and can possibly even be traced back further than that, because of the festivals that the Celts had. There was a lot of feasting, so food definitely involved. People went around and would gather up items for the feast, for the festival, which was a 3-day festival, not just a 1-day thing. So there was a lot of feasting. When we look at things like costumes that people wear today, that goes way back to those days as well, because people would paint their faces in weird ways, and they would wear strange clothing. There's an old tradition of turning your clothing inside out to protect you from the fairies. And, of course, the Celtic people weren't talking about Tinkerbell fairies. They were talking about the fairies. They were these primordial spirits that could make your whole day bad if they wanted to, or spirit you away, and you wouldn't come back until all your friends and family were dead, and things like that. So it was a big thing to think about the fairies. So they would disguise themselves before going out during the time of the thin veil, because they wanted to trick whatever spirits into believing that maybe they were spirits too, or they couldn't be recognized. And so that's a practice that started way back then. It was co-opted by All Saints Day, because people still wanted the whole costume aspect, because who doesn't like a little dress up? And so what they ended up doing was they said, dress up like your favorite saint. That'll work. And so the costuming element continued on. And then as we moved forward to All Souls Day, when people were souling and gathering up the soul cakes, we also had the mummers who were doing basically vamped up folk dances that came, again, back from the pagan agricultural traditions, but instead they were bringing it forward into the concept of the All Saints Day and All Souls Day. So they were putting on performances that would have originally been pagan, but they've been Christianized. And then it moves forward yet again when we talk about Guy Fawkes Night, because people were running around, some people were running around dressed as basically Guy Fawkes and causing all kinds of vandalism and mischief. And so it's interesting how it's moved forward and forward and forward until we now have costumes that we buy in the store. But it comes from all the way back, all the way back from the idea of just let's disguise ourselves so the spirits don't mess with us. And it's just changed so much over that period of time. And that's just one example. The divination was a practice that we've seen done, again, back in the Celtic days of Samhain, and because winter was coming and people needed to know, how are we going to get through the winter? So divination was really important during that time. And those things actually moved forward as well. When the Irish first came to America, they brought a lot of the traditions with them, and we've seen a ton of divination games that were taking place during the colonial and Victorian times for Halloween in America. And it was just something that everybody did. It wasn't considered weird or woo-woo or anything. It was just something that a lot of people did, and, perfectly acceptable to throw some nuts in the fire named for you and the guy that you really like and watch how they pop to determine whether he's the right one for you. This was just something that was done a ton. So, there are other traditions that always carried through, the feasting traditions, food being associated with Samhain, and it's so associated now because of the trick-or-treating. We're going door to door and we're getting treats. And again, that started back, because Samhain was a agricultural harvest festival. So yeah, it's interesting how it's moved and changed and morphed through the years into becoming what we celebrate today.
It'll be interesting to see how it also, changes throughout the years to come as well, because there are some parts that stay.
I agree.
Yeah. I'm kind of old school. I don't know. I mean, I like, for my Halloween, I'm not into like the whole bloody things. That's not my deal. Mm-hmm. But hey, to each their own. No judgment on that. But I do love handing out candy for the little kids that come up and just seeing all their costumes. That's one of my favorite things to do.
That honestly is one of my favorite things to do too. I love that, and it's everything to me. It's one of the reasons I deck the house out so much, other than the fact that I just love to do it. I love all that stuff. But part of it is, I deck the house out because these days it seems like, depending on where you live, I'm sure it's different from region to region, but where I live in a small town in middle America, and you know what? There's not as much trick-or-treating as there used to be, and I don't want to see it go away. So that's one of the reasons that I like to deck my house out big time. I've got the flashing lights, everything going, and I dress up, and it's a big thing. I get so much candy. I get as much candy as I can because the kids see it, through the month of October, and if they're going to hit any house, they're going to definitely come to mine. And it's kind of hashtag Halloween goals.
Well, they may or may not, depending on this next discussion here, because, in the book it talks about Halloween kale matchmaking, and I don't even see how all those things go together.
Right? I know. It's so weird. That's one that comes back. It was brought back from Ireland, and it was just one of those weird folk traditions that was brought forward. And it was one of the things that they did during the colonial times in America. It was just a tradition that the people would go out into the field. And how does this tie in with Halloween? It does, because it ties in because it's divination. And especially during the colonial times in America, because people were, getting married very young because, people didn't live as long as they do now. And it was, culturally acceptable. It was all about who am I going to marry, because America was new and there weren't a lot of big cities, but in the rural areas, this was super important. Who am I going to marry? Is he going to be wealthy? Is he going to not be wealthy? Is he going to be kind to me? Is he going to be a jerk? Are we going to have a lot of kids? So that we can continue our line on. These were all the really important moments of the day, the important things that mattered to people. So this was one of the practices, and there's so many. The young people, they'd get together, and these were basically teenagers they'd have these big Halloween parties, or they called them play parties. And they would go out into the kale field. It was a whole thing. They'd walk backwards, and they'd reach down and find a bundle of kale, and they would pull it up out of the ground. And then they would examine the kale, and the symbolism of what the kale looked like that they chose when they weren't looking would symbolize what their future relationship would hold. So if they pulled it up and, the roots were, kind of spindly and there wasn't a lot of soil attached to the roots, then that was a sign that you probably were going to marry poor. And if you pulled up a bunch of kale and there was a lot of soil clumped around those roots, that represents growth and fertility. So that would be a sign that whoever you were going to marry would probably have money or good resources, because the soil, of course, is a resource for the roots of the kale. And they would also look at the leaves to determine, somewhat what they thought, that the person you were going to marry looked like. If they were long and spindly, you were probably going to end up with Ichabod Crane, versus, big, full-looking kale leaves might indicate, a kind of more husky dude or husky woman that you were going to marry, more curvy maybe. But in those days, these were all indicators of how wealthy you were. It was a different time.
Yeah. Well, okay. So all the kids still are coming to your house because kale doesn't sound like it's involved there. So
it's not, and that's a good thing. We might put it in a salad in the house, as part of our open house or something like that. But yeah.
Yeah,
there won't be any kale in the trick-or-treat baskets at my house. Fear not.
Well, that is so awesome. I mean, my gosh, your book covered so much. I mean, there are tips. There are all these interesting things. I mean, I just couldn't. It was just fun. And are you finding that people are getting the book and sharing it with their friends, going, "Hey, let's see about some of this," or just reading about some of the fun facts?
Yeah, they are. I'm getting a lot of feedback so far that people are reading the book and they're totally relating to it. They're going, yes, this is my experience as well. And then there's extra tidbits in there that they didn't know about, and I try to include stuff like that I thought would be fun, for people to, because there's so many people who love Halloween and maybe don't know as much about it, about the history and about the symbols and things like that. So I tried to include things like the symbols of Halloween, like bats. Why are there so many bats on decorations? And there's a reason for that, and we seek the ghosts and the skeletons. Is it just because they're scary? And it's like, well, no, there's reasons for that, which, we talked about, because it being, a festival of the dead, those things that actually have reasons for being, not just because they're scary, but because they actually have a history to them. So, that's kind of fun. And then, I love the idea of, Halloween decor that has something behind it. I have a thing in there about making your own witch bottles. We go to the store, we see these clever little, eye of newt and, wing of bat bottles that they have, the really cool fancy decor ones. And this year, super disappointed because most of them apparently don't open. Because sometimes I've purchased those in the past and I'm like, these are so cool. And this is the truth. If you know a witch and you want to give her a great gift, give her an empty bottle. I'm not even kidding. We love fancy empty bottles. A rock. We love rocks. Things like that. Things that you would think, who would want that? You give a witch a rock and an empty fancy bottle, and she's your friend for life. So,
oh my
but yeah,
I
definitely.
love that though. You know,
it's true because everything has energy. So, I came up with this, great idea to make your own fancy witch bottles at home. And the truth is, Eye of Newt is an actual thing, and it's not got anything to do with a newt. So these are just the old, right? No newts were harmed in the making of this Eye of Newt. It's actually a name for an herb. It's mustard seed, and a lot of people don't know that. So the idea was, why not make these cool witchy bottles and put the names of the old witchy names on the bottle, and then to get it extra fancy, underneath it you can put the botanical names because they're all in Latin, and it looks super witchy, right? Yeah. But the neat thing about it is you can put all these bottles out, and then when your friends come over for your Halloween party and they're like, "What's this?" and it's like, grab your phone and you can Google it and see what that really is. And it's kind of neat. If you Google the Latin name, it'll come right up and you'll be like, Eye of Newt is mustard seed. Who knew? There you go. So it's kind of a neat thing because it's interactive, It's very much interactive. I try to include things that people can actually use and do, at their Halloween parties with their friends. If you want to do tea leaf readings, I got it in there. You've got instructions on how to do tea leaf readings, If you've never done tarot readings and you want to try, Halloween's the perfect time of the year to give it a shot, And I've got the basics on how you can do that. Of course, books and volumes and tomes are written on the subject, but it's a jumping off place. So yeah, I wanted to include a lot of things that people can share with their friends.
Oh, and you did such a beautiful job. I mean,
thank you.
Easy. Yeah. I mean, it's so easy for people to pick it up, and just if they're having friends over and having the trick or treaters come by or what have you, it's fun. You can pick it up and start reading it and start doing some of the things. So there's a lot of information that's in there. It is very, very helpful. Well, and so. My goodness. I mean, we could be, Mickie, we could talk all day on this book. It was too much fun.
We could totally.
Really too much fun. And with Halloween just 2 days away, what a better time to have this discussion. I mean, my goodness. So if you're looking to get this book, it is in all bookstores, so you want to hurry up and get your copy before it is sold out because it's a bestseller. So,
thank you,
Mickie. Yeah, and what a great thing. Well, and so if people are looking to connect with you and learn more about the other things you do and this book, where could they go?
Oh, I'm on Facebook. It's just Mickie Mueller. Super simple. I don't have anything weird. Instagram, same thing. Mickie Mueller. Twitter. I'm out there. I'm out there. So go add me And the other thing that's neat about if you follow me on Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that, my husband and I run several Etsy stores as well where we have copies of the book, obviously, but we have, a lot of other really cool stuff that we do there too, and we make it all in our workshop and ship it all over the world. So, when I make new items and or we're just letting you know about some stuff that's been relisted, the first place I always put it is Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, and just go to any of the social media, just type in Mickie Mueller, and that's me.
Oh, well, Mickie, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you for having me. I've loved talking about Halloween, and I'm always happy to do it.
Well, thank you again, Mickie. My goodness, it's been so much fun to talk with you about Llewellyn's Little Book of Halloween. What a great gift it is, and it's available in stores everywhere so people can pick up their own copy and, of course, give that out to their friends for Halloween. What a great thing to talk about. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.